3.
Well, welcome everybody to the Policy Development Strategic Direction Committee for March 8th, 2022. You've taken attendance already, Nancy?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Okay, so we could have approval for the agenda. Do we have a mover or a seconder? Moved by Councillor Pierce, seconded by Councillor Gatward. Is there any additions to the agenda for tonight? Okay, all in favor then? It looks unanimous and passed. Declaration of pecuniary interests tonight? Okay, seeing none. For delegations, petitions, and presentations, we have 4.1, John Kemp. We welcome you, John.
Glad to be here.
So I understand you have a presentation of slides, if you're able to present them.
Yes, got to figure out how to accomplish that.
Mr. Chair, could I get the address of the presenter, please?
Oh, okay. John, could you give us your address and your full name, I guess?
Yes, John Kemp. And it's 39 Andrew Street, St. George, Ontario.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. Things aren't going the way I expected here. There we are. Can you see my screen?
No.
No.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, we can see a screenshot of your phone.
The
I guess.
Zoom, yeah. I can't
We
say
don't
I've
see-
actually accomplished this before on this machine.
Okay.
Share content. Let's try to screen it this way. Now this isn't turning quite out the way we expected. This is supposed to be a dream. I tried this earlier.
You're hitting the share screen at the bottom?
Yeah, but then it doesn't get me the file I'm supposed to be getting.
I don't know if there's any staff that can give any suggestions.
Are you still seeing my screens?
No, we don't see your screen at this point.
Okay.
Are you sharing off a computer?
Heather, would
or
you
a
like
phone?
to?
I'm just saying, if council wants to maybe move on to the next item, I will call John and try to get a copy of that presentation so I can share it for you guys if you want to move on for a few minutes.
We can do that and then circle back. Okay. So the next step would be adoption of minutes from previous meeting, 5.1, Policy Development Strategic Direction Committee minutes. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor Howes. Any comments or questions in regards to the minutes? Okay. See none. So all in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, unanimous. Thanks. We'll go on to the business arising from the minutes. Consent items 7.1. Consent items received to be approved. Parkland dedication bylaw, Matt Vaughan. Would you like to make some comments or presentation on that, Matt?
Thanks very much. To the chair, there's no presentation tonight, but I am available if there are any questions. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Matt? Councillor Chambers.
Not a question, Mr. Chairman, but I'll move that the consent items be approved as presented. 7.1 and 7.2.
Okay. Would anybody like one pulled? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull 7.2.1, please.
Okay. And Councillor Pierce, or same? Okay. I think that
I'm good.
separates them. So, yeah. So we have a recommendation for the Parkland one. Do we have a mover for that and a seconder?
Councillor Chambers moved that. We just need a seconder.
Oh, okay. So seconder, Councillor Miller. Okay. Now, is there any questions in regards to that report? Okay. So all then in favor then? Okay. So that's passed. Before we go back, has John Kemp been able to come up with his presentation?
Yes, I do have the slide now.
Okay, should we circle back to that then, and then we'll go on to the loop after?
Certainly.
So, okay. So I don't see John on the screen at this point.
No, it appears we've lost him.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still working on it, Councillor McAlpin.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Russell Press's report on the cycling loop. Russ, would you like to give us a presentation? Yeah, you're on
Muted,
mute,
Russ.
Apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a presentation for this report, but I am certainly happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do we have some questions for Russ? Councillor Bell, and then Councillor House.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Russ. Russ, as I said in my email to you, great report. I'm absolutely on board with the concept. I just have a couple of questions about some specifics. And all of those specifics relate to the off-trail part of the loop. Let me start with Mile Hill. We have had, John Pearce and I have had quite a lot of complaints about pedestrian and cycling safety on Mile Hill. So it seems a little inopportune to route a cycle route down Mile Hill, but it brings up the broader question of safety of people and cyclists and indeed motorists on Mile Hill. And I understand that Greg Demers is bringing forward a report next month to talk about options for Mile Hill. One of the options that I would like to see considered is that we make it one way, that we then put appropriate markings to delineate a cycle track and a walking track down Mile Hill. It has become quite a bypass around Rest Acres since we put the roundabouts there. That's my first comment. The second comment is really around Bethel Road. And that's going to become a really busy industrial area with a lot of heavy traffic moving up and down there. And my suggestion was, should we not consider using Robinson Road rather than Bethel Road? And I'll stop at that point. Thank you, Russ. Happy to take your comments on it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell. Thank you very much. Mile Hill, regarding both of these, in fact, it's been a number of years since these routes were approved through our roads division. And most definitely, given the volume of change that's happened from the time that roads last reviewed and approved to when this is now being able to be implemented given the pandemic. Most certainly, I've spoken with the RTO, the collaborators in this, the Regional Tourism Organization for this project. And most certainly, I can let you know that staff, both from the RTO and ourselves, would most certainly be willing to look at alternating the route to address any concerns that you might have, most certainly. Specific to Mile Hill, in the safety of the entire route, listening to Greg Demers' report on options that might be provided there certainly seems to make sense, as well as Bethel Road and the move suggestion to Robinson Road. It's really, safety first and primary on that, and I can assure you that the collaborators on this project will certainly would be willing to take a look and make sure that we're providing the safest possible route for the signature cycling experience.
Thank you, Russ.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Russ. Yes, thanks for the report, Russ. It looks great. My question is specific to this loop becoming a great success, and I think it will, and how bicycle parking in downtown Paris might be considered as we move forward, recognizing that we do have a downtown master plan. We're going to be making changes downtown, and also recognizing that it'll be 2 or 3 years at least before that's done. I'm wondering if we have any short-term bicycle parking solutions that are being considered. I've had inquiries from at least one merchant downtown on this subject, and I don't expect you to have an answer right on the spot, but I'm just wondering if we can maybe give that some thought and hopefully have some information at a future meeting.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor House, most certainly I can bring some additional information to a future meeting. That's certainly not a problem. I can let you know that parking for the start and finish of this signature route is around the Arlington, and the Regional Tourism Organization has had conversations with the Arlington around this, and I'm certainly able to go in and see what the advancement has been on the cycling parking and facilities that are being spoken of in that area. Certainly happy to do that.
Oh, great. Thank you. And I could see situations where there's 50 or 100 or more bicycles on a lovely June weekend that need parking spots. So yeah, I'll look forward to some further information on that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the committee know that I met with the mayor of Cambridge and the mayor of Brantford last week regarding this loop, and with Joy O'Donnell and the province, and also Trillium, who is very supportive of this whole loop as part of the trail system. And there's some funding that we've been granted for signage and other things from Trillium Foundation and from the province of Ontario. So they saw the loop as a wonderful addition to their trail system, and so we have support both provincially and through Trillium. So that's it.
Okay. Any more comments? Joan, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Bishopsgate Road area, has anyone really had a good look at that? There's a lot of transport trucks, big vehicles, sometimes farm equipment. And will the cyclists be riding on the shoulders or on the road? I guess because it's a gravel shoulder, and it's an 80-kilometer road. I mean, it's a real nice smooth road, especially compared to Robinson Road, and it's wider, but because of the large trucks, I was just concerned about where the cyclists would ride. Can Russ answer that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward. I'm happy to field that question, and certainly an important question. And with safety being paramount, I can share with you, Councillor Gatward, that when the original route was being discussed, it actually took through Rest Acres Road to get over the 403. And it was deemed by our roads division that that was not optimum for safety. And it was suggested that the route go out to Bethel and cross over, or sorry, the road has escaped me. Sorry, Councillor Gatward.
Bishopsgate.
Bishopsgate, thank you. Bishopsgate to cross over the 403. And at that time, it was deemed that that was the most appropriate route for this. And I can share that this signature cycling experience is marketed to what's known as in the industry as avid cyclists who do travel on these routes and these signature routes throughout the province. And it's geared on a number of routes that would be located or you would be able to see similar routes in Quebec and Vermont, and very similar roads to Bishopsgate. That being said, Councillor Gatward, again, I'm happy to go back to the collaborators at the Regional Tourism Organization and have a look at the route.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about safety, and probably the Ward 4 councillors would know better how many gravel trucks are on that road. But I didn't want to see anything happen, and certainly, does this increase our liability doing this rather than using the actual trails we have in the county?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward, I can certainly look into that and bring that information back to committee if that's requested.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're making suggestions, I know the number of gravel trucks on Bishopsgate is going to increase as because we got a couple more gravel pits opening up. The only thing I would suggest, through Mr. Chair to Russell, is minimize the time on Bishopsgate, go down Bethel, and then cut onto Cleaver, turn onto Cleaver, and then get onto Robinson. And that's actually quite a nice. That's a nice path. You get off of Bethel well before the industrial park. So, and then you're minimizing, like I say, the time on Bishopsgate, which is a very busy road. So it's going to get busy.
Okay. So we have more comments or questions for Russ? Okay. I don't think we had him. Oh, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Russ, I should have mentioned one through the chair. Should have mentioned one more road, and that was Powerline. I've had, and I think I brought to this council, concerns raised by residents of Powerline Road about the speed with which people drive down Powerline Road. It is a very narrow road with edges that sometimes drop off into farmers' fields. And I've been made aware by residents of Powerline of people ending up on their front lawns when they've run out of road because somebody's coming the wrong way down the other side of the road. So again, it's really back to the same issue that Councillor Miller brought up about the challenges of working on a road like Bishopsgate. The same is going to be true for Powerline. And I think we need to put in place some facility that makes it very clear what is for cycling and what is not. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Okay. Did we have a mover and seconder for that, Nancy?
I have Councillor Chambers moving it. I do need a seconder.
Okay. Do we have a second by Councillor Coleman? Okay. All in favor of receiving the report? Okay. Is there anybody opposed? Okay. Passed. Okay. Is John Kemp ready now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Then we can proceed with your presentation then, John.
Okay, so in 2018, we started a giant hogweed mitigation project, myself and some other volunteers, with the intent to see what we could do to minimize giant hogweeds, and first of all, to map them. So this is our introduction. Next slide, please. We've got the mapping of the Grand River main course, and we've also had reports on the NITH, but we've been focusing on the Grand, so I can't map the exact locations on the NITH. We have approximately 90 locations of giant hogweed in the Brant County area. This map shows the majority of the ones that we found. In total, we have, I think, 295 sightings on the main course throughout the Grand River. Next slide, please. So what we're looking for is this weed here. It's this picture is taken the 15th of April. So you can see most of the area in the around is brown. It's dead from the winter, and there's very few things that are green. The giant hogweed there by their feet is quite large. That'd be a second-year plant. And in the background, there's a little bit of garlic mustard, and that's all we have in mid-April. Next slide, please. So we've done the mapping since 2011, counting the locations and attempting to find a good platform for mapping. And we realized last fall that we actually had enough data to plot the growth pattern. And so we did, and we determined mathematically what is the growth pattern, and it does fit a good curve. And if we project this out to the future, at the present rate of growth, by 2027, we'll have giant hogweed every 5 meters or so down the entire course of the Grand River in Brant County. Kitchener would be worse, and south of Brant County, it appears to be better, say less weeds. So this is what I would call an invasion that's well started. It's manageable at this point. If we wait till 2027 to start, it'll be nearly impossible to recover the river from the weeds. It'll be difficult to get in and out of the water without having to push through the monstrous plants. Next slide, please. So where it grows is in damp, seldom visited riparian areas. Riparian because the seeds are transported downstream by the currents. If it lands in dry soil or rocky soil, they won't grow. They need to have fully damp soil. It's a hazardous plant, it's an invasive plant, and it is on the noxious weed list. That's not particularly the issue. The real issue is that it's hazardous. Why is it here? Historically bad decisions. We've got gardeners who disposed of a plant. Maybe they threw it over the fence, threw it in the creek, whatever, and the seeds move and propagate. Waste management decisions have been poor in some areas. We know that in that upper Grand portions near Kitchener and Waterloo, the seeds were put in landfill or in compost, which then found its way into landfill along the edge of the river, and that's where it all started. Plant sales, they used to sell these in nurseries in the 70s, and that's been stopped now with the noxious weed determination. And political interests. The political interest here really is that the Weeds Control Act is specifically targeted toward agricultural business. It doesn't have any specific concerns cited for recreational or for tourism. And then we have some other bad decisions regarding who owns the properties. In particular, we'll talk some more in the future here about the islands, which were part of the treaty properties. The who on this is the landowners. The landowners are legally responsible to remove the weeds. The GRCA is one of those landowners. They own quite a bit of property, and they do a pretty good job monitoring their properties and managing them. And the recreational users are the folks who are going to be on the brunt of this. Next slide, please. So the seed transportation is the key to the population growth. The seeds float. They can last quite a while. They can float very long. Then they get interrupted by the shorelines. The river's not straight, so they'll bump into something. The high water eddies, not the low water eddies from the summertime when you're kayaking, the high water eddies from floods and stuff where it's not safe to be in the water. Those are the eddies that carry, or the currents that carry the seeds, and they'll eddy out in those high water eddies. If they find a damp location, then they can grow there. So high water events like the one we just had, which actually was fairly minor, that'll move some of the seeds around. So what we've mapped becomes less important every time there's a high water event. And the reproduction occurs in the second or later year of the plant's life. So we got some time to find each individual plant before it goes to seed. The unmonitored soils are essentially unwanted, unuseful. Farmers can't plant it, the cows can't graze there, so it doesn't get monitored much. It's not really of any value. You can't camp on it, it's full of mosquitoes and mud. So no one's actually going to look there, but that's where the seeds germinate, and that's where the plants grow, and they drop more seeds, and then the cycle continues. Next slide, please. So the issues are predominantly the islands. Since there's no owner of many of the islands, then there's no responsibility, and they're not monitored. So there's no control. So the islands are really the breeding grounds and the seed banks. There's about 30 islands in Brant County. 3 of them are owned. The rest of them are, I think maybe they still belong to the King of England because they're not being taken care of. The next issue is absentee landowners. We've got something like the gravel companies own thousands of acres along the shorelines of the Grand River. They're not there, they're not paying attention. And certainly they don't have a budget for monitoring and control. Ineffective legislation. The Weed Control Act doesn't tell people that they need to inspect. It gives a responsibility to remove the plants. The Invasive Species Act essentially is useful as a control tool, again, once they've been identified and found. So those 2 tools need to be sharpened before they're going to be much help here. Lack of public knowledge is an issue. Most people don't know that giant hogweed exists. They won't know not to use it for toilet paper. They won't know not to walk through it to get to the fishing spot. Lack of comprehension by policymakers. The fact that there's giant hogweed in Ontario is common knowledge. The fact that there's an invasion going on in the Grand River, which is manageable, is not known. Most people don't want to know that, and they won't know how to manage it either. And there's no funding left for their remedial actions. There used to be a rapid deployment squad through the Invasive Species Plant Council that was funded by the provincial government. That's all been taken care of, it's gone. And the big deal is that we know the population count is increasing by 500% per year. Next slide, please. So I have 2 visions of the future with a 5-year horizon. Present volunteer action, we can continue to see 500% growth per year. So that would result in some scary things. Swimming and fishing, and camping and exploring, that would be a scary proposition. Boating could be dangerous. So some people will get damaged from, you get a physical burn when you get in contact with the sap of the plant. So if you brush against the leaf in anytime it's green, so anytime from April till November, you can get a chemical burn from it. And if this does become a problem, of course, there'll be some notoriety involved, and that would affect tourism. If we go with a full-on assault, which is somewhat what I'm proposing, then most river users will become aware of the plant. We'd have a rapid response team so we could take care of the plants that show up in July when there's not much time left. And the population should be able to be controlled to somewhere where the levels like they're at now, about 1 plant per, or 1 population per kilometer. Next slide, please. So my recommendations are that we look into the success story of the Moutclair River. This is a river in Ireland that had a similar problem in the 90s, and Joseph Caffrey, who was in the Irish Fisheries Ministry, mandated some work, and they worked with the government, and now the the entire river is essentially free. You can see these plants from Google Earth. They're large enough to see from space. And if you cruise along the Montclair River, there's about 3 patches that are significant that remain. So we should consider how to affect our policymakers to improve the regulations and the situation. We can consider how Brant County can contribute to a socioeconomic study. That would be a key factor in trying to get money from the province to assist with this. And if we deploy some incentives, such as the community improvement plan, which I'm pitching, we do that very quickly, as quickly as possible, then that will help. And the idea with that is to encourage citizens and landowners to inspect so we can find the weeds. Once we know where they are, then we can control them. If we sit back and expect the weeds to tell us where they are, we won't get very far. Next slide, please. So in summary, urgency is the order of the day. The population growth at this time is 500% per year. Next year it'll be higher. So we don't want to delay too much. Giant hogweed has a negative impact on recreation. It has a negative impact on our ecosystem. In this case, the existence of the plants changes the vegetation by shading out the smaller stuff, and changes the root mechanisms, and therefore it encourages erosion. Giant hogweed provides a human health risk. We haven't been able to document what the baseline health risk is because the health unit doesn't have records of who got burnt by a giant hogweed or who got poison ivy. They just don't have a mechanism to track that. So there isn't really any baseline information. The remediation costs will skyrocket with delays. This would be more than the 500% per year, because as you delay, the patches get bigger, and the cost of mitigating a large patch is larger than a small patch. So we need to act to protect our downstream neighbors. The seeds go downstream, and we share them with everybody if we let them get away. The landowners need incentives to act because of this small time window. You figure a particular grower has had the farm perhaps for generations. They've never had to look for giant hogweed. They've never had to deal with it. So this is a new cost. It's a new procedure. It's something they're not familiar with. And we could encourage them verbally, but that may take years for it to catch on. And we don't have that much time. So I'm proposing that we use some financial incentives to encourage them to inspect their properties twice a year, and it would need to be done for 4 contiguous years in order to really put a clamp on the giant hogweed populations. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we're at the 10-minute mark.
Okay. So the goals of the community improvement plan I've highlighted here: to encourage finding and reporting of populations, to encourage remediation. That can be done with a shovel in the spring. It doesn't require chemistry. Increase the awareness within the correct relevant citizens groups, such as landowners and school children. Establish a baseline and a metric for control.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you there, John, quickly.
Yes.
Do you have very much left to do, or?
No, I think we're almost done.
Okay. I'll give you just a minute then.
Yeah, okay.
To wind up.
Next slide. Next slide, please. So I put in some guesses as to what the prices or costs might be for the plan. They're out here on this slide. And then the return on investment, we've discussed a little bit on this slide. These slides will come out so you can read them at your leisure. Next slide, please. And in July, this is a picture of how big these plants get. And of course, you need a hazmat suit, and it's dangerous to remove them. So we don't want to control them in July. We want to control them in April. And we want to have as many inspectors as we can possibly get to find them. So that's the background, and the details of the community improvement plan I provided in a draft or proposed plan. I'd like the county to seriously consider that. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this.
Well, thanks for your presentation. Do we have some questions for John? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, you made this presentation at the GRCA also, and certainly it's a big concern. We have a lot of tourists in Brant County who use the river for canoeing, kayaking, tubing, whatever. And if they land on the shore and get into this hogweed, then they're in big trouble, along with any pets. I know someone whose pet got into giant hogweed last summer, and this pet, his whole face was covered in blisters. The vet bill was over $600, and it's horrible when you see it on people. I think you had some slides at the GRCA of a child who'd gotten into giant hogweed. And I really think that your volunteers are putting themselves at risk, but I know they do everything to protect themselves with those hazmat suits and gloves and boots, and that's great. But when we spoke at the GRCA, I recall you saying that the volunteers are just that. They don't get paid, and that you were running out of funding when you needed to use chemicals. Are you looking for any funding?
Well, at this point, we have some funding which should be sufficient to control the 4 islands that we're focusing on right now. So not particularly looking for, say, a cash advance or a budget. Mostly I'm looking for more inspectors. We need to establish the baseline of where the plants are. And typically the landowners step up and take care of the plants as soon as they're notified that they're there, with the exception of the islands, because no one wants to own the islands. So no, I'm not actually looking for money. I'm looking for some kind of incentives or assistance with the inspections.
And hopefully the
Councillor
expositor,
Miller.
and if I might follow up, hopefully the expositor is listening, and or the county could do a press release to assist you, saying that your organization's looking for volunteers to help with this, because it is so important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. First question to John. Actually, I'll say I'm impressed with the plan you put together. It looks like you did a lot of work. I read it from start to finish. First question is, does the giant hogweed have any natural enemies in our area?
No, there's no known predators other than deer will sample it. Cows and sheep can actually graze on it, depending on the color of their skin. The black-faced sheep love it and they'll eat it. It's no problem because they have dark skin. However, in the Grand River, because of the soil types along the river, there's not much grazing that goes on close to the water. They're also typically fenced to keep the manure and such from getting in the river. So there's no bugs or caterpillars that eat giant hogweed. There's been some studies done in Europe and through University of Guelph. Nothing that's becomes a good control item.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if there was a fungus, an insect, anything like that. But and no, we don't want animals grazing right up to the river. It's not good for water quality. Second question then, in your plan, you mentioned inspections and other ways of identifying through hiking or by boat, and you use that phrase about 5 times in the plan, hiking or by boat. did you just overlook drones, or do you think that might not be a viable
We
option?
haven't had very great success with drones. The issue is to get close enough to the water to operate the drone safely. You've pretty much done most of the walk to get there, and you can do the inspection while you're there. We have used a drone. You crash it into trees. It's a lot of money to fix it. You can't actually see well from the elevation that's safe to fly unless you get a really good camera. So we did do some experiments. I think that was Grant County proposed that 2 years ago at our first meeting. So we tried that, but it ended up that the drone operator ended up having to wade through the river and search the island to find the drone. So it was just as effective to search the island on foot.
Okay, I do. I'll just say I know you can control drones from like 5 miles away, 8 kilometers, and the quality is fantastic. So hopefully, maybe that is something that can be revisited, because I know it's they've got one up there. But I'll leave it at that. What's
The
that?
experiment we did was to try and determine the difference between angelica leaves and garlic mustard leaves and giant hogweed leaves from the drone. And as it was, unless you're about 30 feet off the ground with a good quality camera, you can't actually tell the difference.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for John? Okay. Do we have a recommendation for from the committee for this issue? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that we pass John's report to staff and get a report back from staff in a month from now. Given that we're in March, I think where time is pressing, we shouldn't allow more than one cycle.
Second by Mark LaFerrier. Councillor. Okay. And any comments or questions on that? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the motion. So is the report just to suggest possibilities, or to look further into the report that we were given tonight?
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I think given the sense of urgency that John has created, and quite reasonably so, I think we need to be coming back in a month from now with firm actions for this year. Otherwise, we're 500% further down the road. Okay. Councillor LaFerrier.
Yeah, and also just to add some staff point of view, and staff may have some options that John didn't see because he's not on staff, and also to validate the pieces here. And if it does, then that only strengthens the giant hogweed group and what they're trying to do. So I think adding some of that staff validity to it is only helpful. But I just want to thank you, John, for the report and the presentation. It's very helpful. But we do need some action, it sounds like, because now we're on year 3, I think, of this of what we've been trying to do. So let's see what we can do from all our different departments that work in tandem.
Okay. Councillor Chambers and then Councillor Gatward.
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm not going to write the staff report on this, but there are various things that we do in other similar situations that we develop cost sharing programs. There's a water quality program. There's an erosion control program at Long Point, where and there's a community improvement programs along with the moth spraying program. Those kind of things. They don't get developed overnight. It takes a while to develop a program. Our community improvement program is already in place, but it might be massaged accordingly. The other thing, by way of comment, the conservation authorities obviously play a huge role in this as well. And you don't want to have two groups going off in different directions, being the municipality and the conservation authority. So coordination has to be a key factor as well. So it's not a task that can be done quickly. There's emergency programming, et cetera, but to develop an effective program might take more than a month. So I just throw that out there and recognize that emergency situations do occur, but long-term solutions can be developed. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Gadward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, certainly I inquired about this when we had our presentation at the GRCA, and they do eradicate hogweed, but only on GRCA properties. And so this group is looking to get permission from property owners along the river and go in and eradicate the hogweed so that it doesn't continue to spread. And I think it's very admirable what they're doing considering the toxicity of hogweed. So I would hope that we could maybe put even a link on our county website with the hogweed group's contact information and a picture of the hogweed. And if you see this on your property, call John Kemp or email, whatever. Would that be possible to have that done, Mr. Chairman, through you to staff?
I think we could pass that along with the recommendation. Councillor Pierce.
I believe there is something on our site about hogweed. I think it was put up when we were discussing this last year. So I think, I don't quote me, but I believe there's already something there, Councillor Gatward.
Well, if there is,
It'd be worth, yeah.
if there is, that's good. It was a couple of years ago that John came to the county, and certainly I wouldn't have a clue where to find it, but if people are looking for it, then they would probably look for it and find it, hopefully. And I'd like to see a press release as well, because this time of year it's March. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just put hogweed in on our website, and it comes up with other noxious plants, so it is on there with a number to call.
That's good to know. Yeah. Okay. Any more comments to the motion? Okay, I'm going to call the vote then on the motion. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Any opposed? Yes. Let's see. Okay, passed. Staff reports then. RPT 2275 Trillium Way Phase 2 Affordable Housing Project. Michael Bradley.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My report's before you. I think it's a fairly straightforward report. I'll just make one note. There are two agreements that are attached to the report. As the report notes, these are draft agreements. I am seeking delegated authority to finalize these agreements and sign them. I don't believe, we're still working on them. I got a new set of drafts this morning. I don't believe I anticipate any what I would call material changes to these agreements. We're just really chasing around little bits of language, but the city wanted to keep this moving along because they do have a target of getting this project in the ground this year. So that's why we're bringing it in this format. So other than that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Before we go to questions, do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Howes, seconded by Mayor Bailey. Okay. Do we have some questions then, or comments? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Michael, and thank you very much for this report. I'm thrilled to see us see some progress on this very necessary project. I don't have questions about the land exchange, but I just wanted to note your report references that in the future we'll be receiving details regarding the operating model for this building, and there's some details mentioned in the report, and maybe this is more for the benefit of the chair of our social services committee, but at some point before we get too far into this project, I would really like to see us have a little more information on the pros and cons of the operating model as it's outlined in this report. So I just kind of wanted to note that on the front end. And again, thank you for all the work. I know there's been a lot of work, our staff and staff from the city of Brantford, and it's very much appreciated on this project.
Do you have some comments on that, Michael, or?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yes, sir. I can certainly pass those comments along to the staff of the city. I think it's Social Services Committee that'll probably get a report in the near future on the operating model. I think they're very focused about getting the project in the ground. And I think that's a good focus right now. And then that way we've got, during the build process, we've got some time to look at what the final operating model for the project is going to be looking like. I laid out what the current model is in the report, which is a mix of rent geared to income and assisted living and then a few market units. But I think that it needs to be sorted out. So I think that's obviously within the purview of Social Services Committee. And I think maybe it would be appropriate at Social Services Committee when the county councilors feel that you've got a workable operating model, and maybe the city staff should come to council here in county council and just update county council on what that operating model is, and I'm sure they'd be happy to do
that. Councillor LaFerrier, and then Councillor Miller.
Yeah, and just to update on that process piece, I spoke to city social services staff after the social services meeting we had, and we had already spoken about them coming to council, both councils, but specifically our council, to talk a little bit more about the Trillium piece once we've gone through this process on the council side. So I'll flag that, and we can make sure that happens, and that happens in a very timely manner. But I have a feeling that next Social Services Committee meeting, it'll be on there, on that agenda. They were just waiting for both councils to get it this Tuesday before it went to Social Services for finalization.
Thank you very much for that update. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question of clarification through to Michael. Michael, the $12 million that it looks like it's going to cost us to build this, does that $12 million, does that count towards our $15 million of cost sharing for the affordable housing piece that we're committed to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that would count towards that. So that's a big chunk of that commitment basically knocked off in one project.
Okay, thank you very much. In that $12 million, I guess as far as a financial, how we're going to pay for it, how much is going to be debentured, that's all to come later, correct? At some point, we'll see something.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I gave a bit of a high level summary of that towards the end of the report, noting I proposed that, we're looking through this now, but I'm fairly confident in these numbers that we can raise $6 million in the sale of some surplus properties that I've been looking at. We certainly, it's quite feasible, and because we'll have security in these projects to raise some long-term debt. And the treasurer and I are looking at some reserve funds, and that could include using some of the Brant County Power reserve. But again, we're going to continue to chase that down, and you'll see another report. Because that report will deal with some real estate sales, we'll probably bring that report in camera. So, but this gives an indication of where we're looking at funds to fund this.
No, thank you. No, I've seen the high level numbers, but I'm just wondering, there will be, obviously, as we get closer, we're going to see more detail on that. And what I'm getting at is I don't think the 12 million, whatever we debenture, I don't see that being an issue, because I've seen it with other projects that the city's done, where they debenture it, but the money that comes in quickly pays for it, and then they have that money for future projects. So even though it's got a $12 million price tag, at the end of the day, it's not going to cost residents $12 million. And I think I just wanted to get that up there. So, okay, thank you.
Councillor LaFerrier, did you have a question?
I can wait until the second. I can wait until the second go rounds, if there are any.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Michael. Michael, you make the comment that Brantford Local Housing Corporation is wholly owned by the city. Do we need another agreement to ensure that we get our 50% share in their assets, at least as far as Trillium Way is concerned?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it's my understanding, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but it's my understanding that the city will transfer Trillium Way over to the city of Brantford ownership out of the local housing corporation ownership and into the city of Brantford's corporate ownership. And it'll stay in the city of Brantford's ownership, I think, for permanently after that. And then once the project's done, we'll issue payment over to the city, and then the city will basically sell us a 50% share in the whole project. And then that our share will be basically, established in the property deed itself. So as opposed to an agreement, it'll be essentially a real estate transaction. A new deed will be drawn up, and not unlike the deed that is we have for the John Noble home. The county's name will be on that deed, and it'll outline the proportions of ownership of each party. So that's a very clean process, and again, that's outside of agreements, and that's into land ownership. So I think that's personally, I'm very comfortable with that approach that we've laid out, and I think it's a sound approach to fully secure our ownership in this project in the future.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Okay, do we have any more first round questions or comments? Okay, Councillor LaFerrier then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Michael. I know it's in there a bit. I just wanted a little clarity, and especially for those watching at home. If this project goes over budget, it's slated to be about 12 million, but let's say it goes 13, 14, and we have agreed to partner with the city of Brantford for 15 million. Are we protected in that way that by covering the additional costs that may be incurred because of budget overruns? Are we then protected with our share, or will our share have to then grow commensurate with any sort of overpricing or fluctuation in the final cost?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a good question, and actually, I'm dealing with that in the subsequent draft of the agreement. Where so if the costs go over, let's say it ends up as a $14 million project, then we would just chew up $14 million of our $15 million commitment, as opposed to our commitment growing at a proportional rate. So yeah, I mean, our commitment is what our commitment is, and our commitment only theoretically grows over time based on as per the cautionary agreement, based on inflation. So and so because of our upfront contribution, it should manage inflationary pressure and hold our commitment fairly close to what its initial number was. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, and that tells me too that we're likely to see a very high percentage of local monies and local debenture debt go into developing housing in the county of Brant, which was an end goal the entire time. So that's a positive for this project and for the agreement, which is great to hear.
Thanks. So any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder for the report. So all in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Okay, pass then. Moving on to RPT 2276, resumption of in-person meetings. Heather Boyd or Alicia, would you like to take the lead on that?
Thank you, Councillor McAlpine. Just a few comments, if I may. Firstly, thank you to Council for your support and patience throughout this pandemic and the evolution of all the various virtual meeting platforms we've worked through, as we've strived, trying to get an informed and cautious approach to continuing our government over the last few years. As I promised in November, with the recent changes in provincial directive, staff has reviewed the legislative landscape and the logistics of resuming either in-person or hybrid meeting sessions. Staff has put forward a recommendation for consideration to resume in-person meetings in April, and that reflects the earliest we feel we're confident that we'll have everything in place, fully tested, ready to go. We do recognize, however, that there are other factors that may well influence Council's decision and what they feel is appropriate for the timing of this. And staff is fully supportive of whatever date you would look to set to move forward with. And we will be prepared and have the systems and precautions in place for whatever Council's decision is. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Bailey, then Bell and Pierce.
Okay, well, the first thing I want to say, Mr. Chair, is that I think our first meeting back in person should be a council meeting. Because we've had some renovations happening and a whole sort of different look to council chambers. I believe that the mayor needs to be in the mayor's chair wearing the mayor's chain to open a new facility and maybe introduce maybe some sort of food afterwards, a reception for us to get back together after 2 long years of not being together, which means the earliest we could do it would be this month for council, which I don't believe is quite enough time. I believe the ideal date would be after our conventions are over, the council meeting of April. That's what I would suggest that we consider, whether it be hybrid. I would think the first meeting, if we could possibly do it, should be live, all of us that feel comfortable in attending, with the ability to go virtual if you're not comfortable or if you're not well, or if you're just not feeling up to it. But I think as many of us that could get together for the first meeting of council to sort of launch a new facility in a way, would be the way I would go. My suggestion only.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion that we adopt option number 4. And I would like to speak to it if somebody will second that.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Pierce. Okay. So would you like to speak to it first then, John?
I would. We've gone through 2 years of tremendous learning how to manage meetings in different ways. We've been forced to do it this way. And I think it's important that we don't fail to capitalize on that learning, because who knows what might happen going forward. And I do believe that we've put in place the technology in the new council chambers to accommodate hybrid meetings. Our neighbours in the city of Brantford are doing hybrid meetings, and some of us that have been on the Social Services Committee have either been in the meeting in person or we've been there virtually. And I think it works well and can work very well going forward. I'm really concerned that we ease the burden on staff, on ourselves as council, and on the community, those people that come to view or those people that come as delegates. Not everybody is comfortable yet. It is my understanding, and I can be corrected on this, that nobody has actually asked staff yet whether they would like to go back into in-person meetings. And I think that's inappropriate, that we just consider ourselves in this. We need to consider both staff, ourselves, and the broader community. In the longer run, if we adopt this method of operation, it means that we are much more flexible. We've just gone through a very difficult winter, and it's not affected our meeting schedule one iota. And why? Because we've been able to work through virtually. So just imagine next February, when we have potentially in-person meetings for the most part, we would be able to just continue our meeting schedule without a hiccup. And I think that's something that we should not fail to lose. Imagine somebody going on business. Maybe Robert Chambers has to make a journey out to somewhere where he can't make the meeting. Or maybe I'm on holiday. I would like to be in the meeting. This offers us that opportunity. I think we need to move with the times. We should not revert back to something that was actually quite limiting. And now we've got something which is actually quite liberating. I do envisage that the most of the time we will be in person. But imagine that one or two of us may not wish to be here, or a delegate wishes to call in from Ottawa or from Windsor or from wherever. It's possible. So I do commend that we follow option number 4. Thank you, John.
Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think by going option number 4, I agree with Councillor Bell. It leaves that door open to the potential of whether it be inclement weather or whatever reason, right, to be able to have the electronic option to use. So I would be in mind to support option 4, with the caveat that, you know, as council, we do everything we can to be there in person. But if you can't, then, and as was pointed out, the option is there to go electronic. So I support the motion.
Okay. Councillor LaFerrier.
Yeah, I agree. If there's a seasonality to this, I would like to make a friendly amendment, though, that to John's piece about with the start date being the April council meeting. But if there's a piece of this, I know hybrid chairing. I've done it just twice now, once from computer and once in person, and it's difficult. But I mean, there's benefits to it, and even the last time it got less difficult midway through the meeting. There are a couple more moving parts as chair to kind of look at, but that's not insurmountable. I think if we have seasonality to COVID, if things happen, like one of us is in contact with somebody who has COVID and we test negative, but we may want to just, in an abundance of caution, stay home but still participate. If there's there were a couple of times when we were in person where inclement weather canceled council meetings, and that's difficult. And then the other piece being that I know there were a couple of times before I was on council where I left the council chambers as a spectator because it was too packed. And I wanted to make sure people could get let in who were older or could get a seat who were infirm. And I think that's important. So we've had that success. My understanding is too, speaking to IT, that we also have a better camera system set up. So again, we're not going to, if we do the hybrid piece, we're not going back to one camera that only shows the back of Brian's head and the front of mine, right? We're going to a system with 3 cameras in a different room in a different setup. So I think there's a lot of benefits to that hybrid piece and that flexibility for whatever reason, so that we're not having to move a bylaw about telephone meetings like we had to at the beginning of this and things of that nature, but also just allowing the most amount of people to participate, not just view our council meetings. I think we have developed a good opportunity to do this and do it well. So I'm going to support 4, but I'd like to make that friendly amendment that with the start being the April meeting of council. If that's seen as friendly.
Are you agreeable to that, John and John Pierce? Yeah, okay. And the other reason for doing that too is the possibility, and it will come under our next meeting, is that our next standing committee for next month, because probably close to half of us are going to be going to the Good Roads Conference, we might not have quorum. So it might be considered to either hold that meeting on another day or just add the agenda onto the administration meeting. So Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, I just through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell, assure yourself that I am in contact with staff. I spoke to the clerks today. I've spoken with Michael today. I speak to tech every day. I'm at council chambers almost every day, putting this thing together. So I do know what staff feels is right and what they would feel as a pressure. And I think the meeting after the convention gives us the most time to make it the best it can be. And if council chooses to make it a hybrid, I will be there. Hopefully the clerk will be there. Hopefully Michael will be there, and the rest is up for grabs. But I think that we have to come back to some sort of normality where everyone's comfortable. And if we can work that into option 4, then I'm fine.
Okay. Councillor Wee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to support number 4. If you read the whole recommendation, you'll see that staff has made a recommendation, which is number 2, and that's what I would support. But number 4 is on the floor. I will be voting no on number 4. We need to get back to where we were. We were elected to council to attend meetings face to face. If you're on holidays, you chose to be on holidays. That's fine and dandy. I've been on council for quite a while. There's been a couple of times when it's been a really stormy night where we canceled it and moved it. That's doable. But read the recommendation. Staff has put a lot of work into this, and I'm going to support the staff recommendation if it gets that far. If number 4 gets defeated, I will make the recommendation to support number 2.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you again. I have no preference. I'll go any way anybody else wants to. I do support recommendation number 2 over number 4, but I'm not ruling out number 4, and I can live with that. The only comment I would make is that in my mind, the difficult meeting is going to be the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, where you have a public hearing And it could be very, very confusing procedurally in the public hearing part of the meeting. And it's important that the public hearings be carried out in a fair, equitable, and unbiased manner. And there may be some confusion in the public portion of the meeting, not only with members of the committee, but more importantly, members of the public and the applicants, et cetera. So it will be a work in progress, and hopefully when the Planning Advisory Committee meeting does come, the process and the procedure will be looked at as being fair, and probably the easiest way to do that is not to have a hybrid model because it's more confusing, but I'm not saying that it can't be done. So I prefer option number 2, and I would concur with Councillor Wheat that if number 4 fails, then I would support recommendation number 2. But that's up to the committee or the council.
Okay. Councillor Miller, Gatbert, and then Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my 2 cents. I always prefer an in-person meeting. Having said that, I think we got to keep an option for an electronic participation somewhere on the menu there, simply because you don't know, right? You don't know, as has been pointed out a few times. And I'll give you an example. I was at the last council meeting and I was on holidays. And going back to what Councillor Wee, you plan your holidays, you're away. I got that. You can plan your holidays, when the meeting is. The problem is you don't always know what's on that agenda. And there might have been something that came up that you really wanted to speak to. And if you go away or you have inclement weather, at least you have that option. So again, I prefer the face-to-face, but I like an option there for electronic participation. So I'll support 4.
Okay. Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think that option 4 is more council friendly, more public friendly, and I don't think it would be confusing at all for planning. I think, as it says, members of the public could be restricted to electronic participation, but they could be given the option to register for in-person. And some people that live way out in the east end of the county, it may be hard, or the west end at Muir, to get to a 6 o'clock planning meeting when they work till 5 o'clock. So appearing virtually is much easier for them as a delegation than trying to make it by 6 o'clock to Paris. So I think number 4, I agree with that option. And if people have been in contact, or they're not feeling well, or they are away on vacation or at a conference, they can still attend a meeting. So it's the best of both worlds. Certainly we like to be there as we have in the past, but I think we need to, I was at a hybrid meeting yesterday and it worked fine because one of the members of the committee was ill, but still was able to attend. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Bailey.
Well, Councillor Gatward, I was at that same meeting through you, Mr. Chair, and it didn't really work out very well. We couldn't hear, we couldn't see, we were moving microphones around. It really didn't work out as well as you think it might have. And I was at one today where it was one of the staff were brought in electronically, and there was no participation by that member because, again, of the restrictions of the way we did it today. And Councillor Coleman was with me at that meeting. So it's not that they don't work out. Everything works out because you make them work out. is it smooth? I mean, I've watched the city of Brantford's meetings and I don't think they're very smooth at all. I've seen them all shuttled to different rooms. I've seen them all talk and there's nothing coming out of their mouths. I've seen them all move around with all their stuff. I mean, the work gets done, but it's not smooth. And so maybe adopting number 4 will give us that time so that when we do all get together, when everyone is all comfortable, all the bugs have been worked out. But please note that the things that we've done at the council chamber is going to make it much easier for us to get the work done. All the precautions have been taken. All the equipment is new. I think you're going to be very happy when you get there and see that everything's been put into place. But you know, I don't ever want to be said that I've tried to talk anyone into anything. Your comfort level is your own, and I just think that we have to start somewhere. And it doesn't really matter to me 2 or 4 because I'm going to be there for both of them. So I think I will support 4 just because it gives everyone the option. If they do get sick, if they are tired or whatever, you know, and there is more COVID coming, there's other things coming. If you don't feel well, you shouldn't have to go. I don't know. I just think number 4 gives us more options to get the business done in a comfortable manner and a safe manner. That's it for me.
Okay. Councillor Chambers and then Councillor Berry. You're on mute.
I believe Coleman had his hand up.
Coleman. I meant Coleman, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would prefer number 2. I guess I'm really the old guard and the old dog, but I do like our meetings in person, and if you want to take your holidays, you take your holidays and go from there. Because, but there are a lot of times when I've been in the field and had to come and leave early to go make council meeting, whether you get it at the start or you get to it, you made the effort to be at council. And I guess that's what I was kind of elected to do. But if majority goes for 4, I will support it. But I do agree with the mayor. We had a meeting this morning and it was not perfect at all with electronics. And I think if you just remember back to about an hour and 10 minutes ago, we had a case where it was not perfect, where electronics did not work until it took some time. So I prefer number 2, but I will go along with 4 if that's the way the majority goes.
Okay. Councillor Ferrier.
Yeah, I don't go on vacation. I have little kids and I can't wait to get out of the house and I'll be there. But all of that said, I do think that that flexibility piece is important. I also do believe that we forget that there were problems with in person as well, including people not being able to attend, including, you know, I remember a couple different committees where I, as somebody who teaches for a living, would have to come up and fix the PowerPoints for speakers, including forgetting to touch our mics and all that other stuff, right? So that piece is important. The one thing I would say though, and this I'm still going to support 4, but I would like to see our hybrid meeting procedural bylaw be less restrictive to the chair and a little more free-flowing than some other models I've seen. Things like giving solely first discretion in the room, I think actually clunks up the meetings a little bit. And I think chairs can chair. And I think they're going to catch everybody over time. And I think that there are some ways I've seen it happen where the chair has a bit more power in terms of speakers list, et cetera. It's a little less about, you know, control of information flow. There is I don't want to say casualness, but I think in our meetings and our procedural bylaw is pretty strong. And I think chairs, whether it's been online or in person, have a lot of leeway to help the flow of the meeting and to make sure people are heard. And I can see it becoming very restrictive if we sort of overload procedure on top of procedure. And I know that's not really in this report and that's not what this vote's about, but just I think a word of caution about flow of meeting and making sure that the chair has the ability to enhance the meeting and not get sort of stifled by procedural hybrid bylaws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mark. Councillor Chambers this time. Yeah.
Thank you. And again, just to reiterate, council meetings and committee meetings are different than public hearings. Public hearings have to be procedurally fair. And if things such as technical glitches happen, like that's what you have to be cognizant of, because procedure is important in public hearings because it's pursuant to the Planning Act and it has to be a fair hearing. I would be the first to admit that procedural bylaws do enhance the flow of business, and they are important, and they are a municipal act requirement. And the interpretation of procedural bylaws, obviously there's leeway, but I've been at meetings over the past where if it wasn't for a procedural bylaw, it doesn't take much for the meeting to get out of hand, and it can be a very not a productive meeting if indeed sometimes procedures get out of hand. So I agree with flexibility, but I certainly would not expect public hearings to be carried on in a non procedural bylawed fashion. So just a word of caution. There have been appeals to Ontario municipal boards based on procedural fairness, and it may or may not happen. So it'll be a very difficult meeting to chair and to participate in, not only from the public's perspective, but committee member perspective, but also the applicant's perspective as well. So that's my only concern, is with the planning advisory committee meetings as it relates to public hearings with what I'll call a loose procedure with technology. So if that can be tightened up, it should be. But as we've seen tonight, a little bit of patience and a little bit of common sense, people are able to make presentations, and a strict interpretation would not allow that. I don't know how many times we have gone beyond the speaking requirements of 10 minutes. And again, that's where procedural latitude falls upon the chairman, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not to drag this on, because I think we should call the vote here, but just the one point I'm going to make here is the fact we've just done 2 years of electronic meetings for planning meetings with public parts of it. And there may have been the odd little glitch here and there, but I think as a whole in the last couple of years, the public part has been very fair, and the procedures have been followed. I would hazard to say that the first couple of meetings we have back in person, I think they're going to be a little glitchy because we haven't done it in a while. So I think it behooves us to have the option of electronic in there. And as the mayor stated, as we go through with this, let's say October with the new council, or maybe before that, who knows? We might at that point feel comfortable to say, hey, you know what? We've got them worked out. Let's try and roll it back. Or it's working as it is. Let's continue on. I think the option of the online has brought more people to watching our council meetings, which is important. We want the input from the community in there. And I think if we cut that off, I think we'll get a little backlash from that. So I'm in full support of number 4.
Okay, I think everybody's had a chance to speak. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, the motion passed. Moving on to communications. Is there anything communications, Nancy?
No, there is not.
Okay. Number 10, Chief Administration's Officers Update. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening again. I've just got a few things. I'll start as I have as for the last 2 years with my update on COVID-19 here in the organization. And I think as most of you are aware, we have terminated our declared state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic. And last week, we also deactivated our EOC. I think that's just a reflection of what's going on in that space, and a recognition that COVID-19 appears to is going to be with us for a while. And we need to start responding and coping with it as more of a regular business activity as opposed to an irregular business activity. And so the senior management team will take care of any of the lingering matters related to COVID in our workplace and our facilities. And obviously, we'll be approaching council with any recommendations related to the pandemic if they're required. We still have a number of restrictions and processes in place, both within our workplace and within our facilities, according to remaining provincial regulations. And we're still committed to making sure that our facilities and our workplace is safe for both patrons and employees from the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the past 2 to 3 weeks, we do have a fairly steady number of staff that are coming in and out of isolation, but it's a manageable number, and the Brantford Paramedic Service remains stable. They have a few folks in and out of COVID protocols at any given time. But again, we are, I think, in a phase of the pandemic where it's quite manageable, and we do see, I think, a path to returning to a bit of a new normality. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Crozier has a report. You'll be seeing it next week on our post-COVID workplace. It's a for information report, but it'll just talk a little bit about what our and kind of some of the themes that we just talked about, how our workplace will be functioning in the post-COVID environment. So that's my update on COVID-19. I wanted to chat a little bit with the Committee on Employment Lands. At the last council meeting, there was a request to bring the matter of employment lands, and a specific reference was made to some employment lands that had been a topic of discussion on Bethel Road as a topic of discussion at a strategic level discussion at a future committee level. We were originally going to put that on tonight's agenda, but Allison's been working on what we call a white paper on employment lands. And that white paper, I think, is shaping up quite nicely. It's going to talk about the relation between employment lands and from the level of our strategic plan and from the level of our official plan, as well as through our employment land needs study. And it'll talk about some of the market drivers and some of the challenges of employment land. And we think this is a document that'll really help council to have a productive discussion. Now, that document's not quite done, and that's why we didn't put it on tonight's agenda, but we're confident we'll have it done in a very short time. And our proposal would be to introduce it at the next available meeting when it's done in an education session, and allow council to have a look at it, ask staff questions of a technical nature about employment lands, but also to have the opportunity to have a bit of a strategic discussion about employment lands in the community, because the employment land marketplace right now is very complex. And very, very busy, I guess you could say. And so we think that's a rational discussion to have right now. So we'll provide that to you as soon as we can. I just wanted to note that the public consultation for number 2 Beverly Street here in St. George is now closed, and we're working on a report, and we will have it in front of committee next week at the administration operations meeting. And I also wanted to mention that we're just getting ready to release a public consultation for the Burford Servicing and Stormwater Environmental Assessment, which is a project that we started back before the pandemic, and then we put on hold because it was just a little too complicated to try to move forward in the environment that we've been in. We're going to release later this month video and some print material available to citizens, and then we'll proceed with in-person open houses, which we'll be organizing for late April. So citizens will have a chance to look at this background material and learn about the project and start to formulate some thoughts. And then later next month, and hopefully when we're a little more comfortable, we'll have a number of smaller open houses so people can come out and have face-to-face meetings with the project team and learn more about those projects. So we think this is a good transition back into in-person public meetings, but we're going to do it very cautiously. So that's my report, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, do we have some questions for Michael? Councillor Leferrier.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the COVID piece, because I know we might not be reporting it the same way, but I was on the Expositor website and I saw this article, and in it were some stats I think are really impressive, and I think are big kudos for both councils in the city and the county, all staff, all citizens. It was looking at deaths per 100,000 since March of 2020. The County of Brant, 16. Chatham-Kent, 22. Oxford-Elgin, 40. Norfolk and Haldimand, 48. Hamilton, 68. And I know we've had a lot of criticism, and everybody is entitled to an opinion about either being too restrictive or not restrictive enough, but we must be doing something right to have one of the lowest death rates in the entire province, right? And that's the health units, the the healthcare system, the citizens, and the governance and staff, right? And I just think that stat, and these deaths are all tragic, but that stat is a really important one to look at, because we have rural and urban areas within our health unit. We have we can be a comparator to places that are bigger city and to places that are more rural. And either way you cut it, it's a really impressive mitigation of damage and risk. And it just, and while doing the regular business of council, more than many other comparator areas. We were one of the first to start our planning committees and so many other things, and a lot of good news that gets lost in a lot of the noise. But yeah, I saw that and I just wanted to bring it up, and I thought this was an appropriate time to do so.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thanks, Michael, for your report. We have other business, 11.1. Councillor Miller, you have local hockey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a bit of sad news there out of Burford. The Burford Bulldogs played their final game Sunday, and not just for the season. That the club has folded for a variety of reasons. And local hockey, I think we can all agree, has been facing a lot of headwinds. St. George doesn't have a junior club anymore. I know Paris doesn't have one for the last couple of years, but my understanding is they might be starting up. So we've lost the Bulldogs. And I also understand maybe a couple of the higher up levels that for the minor hockey won't be playing next year as well. So I talked about the headwinds, whether it's economics, demographics. Obviously COVID didn't help. The loss of I know Burford, the loss of our weekly newspaper didn't help either, because I know when Bill Johnson put out an edition every week, he would always talk about how the Bulldogs were doing. The turn of the century, they had a team that it couldn't be beat. One of the best, well, was the best team in Ontario for a while. Then the loss of Junior D, they were forced to go to Junior C. They were going up against clubs maybe with some deeper pockets. So I love hockey. I think it's a great sport, and I know it gives a community something to rally around. When the team does well. So I did reach out to Hockey Canada to see what suggestions they might have, because they actually have a community engagement department. So they talked about maybe a Zoom call in the near future, next week or two, and I'm going to question them maybe about what we can do as a municipality to help with community engagement for hockey. What are the best practices? Having said that, I recognize that the hockey associations themselves, the onus is on them, right, to run the local clubs, and I got that. But at the same time, if hockey does well, it helps the municipalities out as well. We run the arenas, so it's not quite the onus on maybe the general taxpayer if we can keep those arenas going. And like I say, it's a great sport. So I'm going to do a little more work on this, and so just letting everybody know about the Bulldogs. Like I say, it's sad news. I had a brother that played for the Bulldogs way back when. I have a nephew that played for the Tavistock junior team, so I'm quite familiar with that level of hockey. And if I can come up with some ideas working with Hockey Canada, I'll definitely bring forward. And I know, I'll just say too, Mr. Chair, that I know Kathy has tried to help out the teams as best she can in her role. But at the end of the day, there's only so much she could do. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's a bit of sad news, but hopefully something will happen better in the future, and wish you luck with that. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Councillor Miller. Good luck with your discussions with Hockey Canada and that. I've had dealings with them before. If you're looking for somebody to go at it with you, I'd be more than happy to help you. I know overall as minor hockey, if you look over the last 5 to 10 years of minor hockey, a lot of the midget level teams, they've been amalgamating, whether it was, maybe Paris would have it one year and St. George would have it another year and Burford would have it another year. And it just seems that once kids are hitting the Bantam age, a lot of them are, unfortunately for whatever reasons, finding other things to do, which I totally agree. It's unfortunate with that. And I know the last discussions with Hockey Canada that I had through minor hockey was the fact that it seemed to be an issue all across Canada. It wasn't just, it wasn't just local to us. It just seemed that as it was the ages get up into the bantam and midget levels, the number of participants is way down. I know, for example, in the 4-on-4 hockey league that I run, I've got 250 kids in it, and I'm still looking for midget age kids. My young ones are all full, but I'm looking for midget age kids. So it's not just it's everywhere with that. So absolutely good luck with that. And if you want somebody to partner with you with that, I'd be more than happy to help.
Mr. Chair, I'll just say I really appreciate that offer, Councilor Pierce. And what I was going to suggest, because when a Zoom invite comes, I'm not sure how it works, but I'm going to ask them if I can bring on anybody, invite anybody, and that includes obviously anybody around this table and anybody at the staff level. So when the invite comes through, I'll be sending out a few emails on that.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Councilor Chambers.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing the issue forward, David, with regard to hockey. I'll go one step further and say that it's not only hockey that is having difficulties in rural communities like Brant County and some of the towns and hamlets and villages. Some municipalities and maybe if Pam Duslin is on the line or someone from the planning department, some communities have developed what they call sustainable community plans, which go hand in hand with strategic plans and hand in hand with official plans. And some municipalities have what they call sustainable community official plans. And it takes the official plan and the strategic plan to the community level and looks at ways to sustain communities. So it might be something our planning department can look at in terms of a sustainable community plan once they've been doing a lot of work on our official plan and strategic plans. And as our official plan matures, we need to have a sustainable communities plan. And that may be a term that many aren't familiar with, but if you look at the documents in some of the other counties, you can see that they recognize that there's issues in rural communities in terms of sustainability, and it's a changing demographic, it's a changing political system, everything is changing, and a lot of things in the rural areas are going the way of the Burford Bulldogs, and maybe it's something that we can discuss at a future one of these meetings in a broader sense in terms of sustaining our rural communities. And by rural communities, I'm classifying Brant County as a rural community as opposed to an urban community like the city of Brantford or Kitchener or something like that. Just some comments.
No, very good comments. So any other comments? Okay. Yeah, no, I wish you luck with that, David. And yeah, it was a big part of growing up playing hockey on the ponds and going to the arenas and stuff over the years, and hate to lose that. So we have nothing in camera that I know of. So the next meeting, the question is whether we cancel it or because it looks like we might not have quorum, and add it to the agenda for the next committee meeting, or whether to try and reschedule it. Is there a preference here? Oh, Councilor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, it shouldn't be an issue getting a quorum. Like the Ogres finished around noon, so people could be definitely back by 6 o'clock. I don't think it'll be an issue. It's never been an issue before.
I think it finishes up Wednesday actually at noon this year. That was brought to my attention, so I just could Heather correct me on that, or Mary, you have some information on that?
Well, I'm just saying that no matter what time it finishes, we can zoom in if that's now that's now the desired way of having meetings. So
Yeah.
no matter, I'll be down there for 2 conventions, so I can just make sure that I'm on the call. So I don't think it needs to be moved at all.
Okay. Is that the general consensus then?
Do you want a motion?
Sure, I guess.
You got one?
Okay. And second by Councillor Wee.
No,
Do you want to speak?
I'm going to comment. Meetings are at the call of the chair. Make a decision.
Okay. Okay, well then we will try and do it via Zoom then. And if there's any problems that comes up, then we'll deal with it then. So it's one of the advantages of being able to do it Zoom, I guess.
Thank goodness for option
Okay.
4.
Yeah, if we could do it, we will maybe in the future. So, okay, motion to adjourn. Moved by Joan, and we are adjourned. Thank you,
Good night,
everybody,
all.
for coming out.